$6.8 trillion. That is the amount of money that we spent globally in 2024 alone on wellness products. And that doesn't include actual healthcare. That is truly just products in this amorphous category of things that are supposed to make us feel better, live longer, age better, but maybe are not actually science-backed. So in today's video, I am going to talk through 18 of these wellness products, wellness trends that may or may not be complete bullshit, that you do not actually have to buy into to reduce your risk of developing chronic diseases. And I'm gonna tell you the one thing you absolutely must do to reduce your risk of developing a chronic disease. Hi, my name is Kara McIver, and I am a registered dietitian that helps young and middle-aged adults reduce their risk of developing diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, with science-backed, easy-to-accomplish behavior changes. We are not getting into anything crazy on this channel. So like any good content, I am going to start with our list of 18 things that you don't have to do to stay healthy. At the end, I will reveal the one thing that you definitely do have to do if you want to stay healthy and reduce your risk of developing these chronic diseases. Now, before you just jump ahead to that one thing at the end, I highly encourage you to stay for the full list of 18. And that is because not everything on this list is complete bullshit. At the same time, not everyone in the world needs to do all of the things on the list. And I'm going to give you some ideas of if you want to incorporate them into your daily life, will they reduce your risk of chronic disease? So let's get into the list. The first thing that you absolutely do not have to spend your money, time, or effort on is drinking a greens powder. Despite what every podcast that you are listening to has told you, you do not need AG1 or some other greens powder. First of all, these greens powders are far and away the most expensive way to get your fruits and vegetables in your diet. The greens powder ingredients list is super long, and it almost always includes a proprietary blend. And what a proprietary blend means is that they don't have to actually tell you what is in there. So you may be getting a lot of something that actually doesn't do anything for you. I'm also going to point out that if you look at the nutrition label, you are seeing like hundreds and thousands of percentages. That just indicates that you are getting, 2 times, 5 times, 10 times more of these vitamins and minerals than you actually need in a day. At best, you are getting 10 times more of a water-soluble vitamin. What it means when a vitamin is water-soluble is that if you eat more than 100% of what you need in a day, you are just going to pee it out. So you are paying for these giant doses of vitamins and minerals that you are just going to pee out. Now, some of the things that they are touting are fat-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins, if we eat mega doses of, they build up in the body and can actually cause toxicity and be really bad for you. There's also no evidence that shows that these greens powders work in the body the same way that a whole fruit and vegetable does. In fact, when you are eating a whole fruit and vegetable, there are things that you are getting besides just the vitamins and minerals. You're getting water, you are getting fiber, and you're getting what we refer to as the food matrix. And the food matrix refers to that the individual parts are not as good as the sum of a whole fruit. So if you were to just pull out the individual parts of a fruit or vegetable, turn it into a powder and consume it, it is likely not going to act in the body the same way that that whole fruit would. So you really do not need greens powders. The second thing on this list is taking supplements. Just like a greens powder is not necessarily going to be as effective, vitamins and mineral supplements are also not something that you absolutely need in your day or in your life to be healthy. If you are eating a diverse diet, lots of different colors, lots of different foods in your diet, you are likely getting most of the vitamins and minerals that you need. Now, there are some vitamins and mineral supplements that are recommended for certain groups of people, but the best way to understand if you need a supplement is to get a blood test done with your doctor. Again, Don't waste money on things like greens powders that you don't need. But if you actually suspect that you have a deficiency, get a blood test done and then spend the money on the necessary vitamins and minerals. The other thing about supplements in the United States is that they're not very well regulated. And so there is no guarantee that what you are getting in supplement form is the right dose that you are looking for, that it's consistent from pill to pill or bottle to bottle. And there's no guarantee that you're not getting some other junk in that supplement. Whereas if you are getting your vitamins and minerals from food, the other stuff that you're getting is going to be beneficial. Just like greens powders, supplements are almost always going to be a more expensive way to get these vitamins and minerals than foods. So I almost never recommend vitamin and mineral supplements. That being said, there are some cases when they are not just a good idea, but absolutely necessary. Specifically, if you don't eat meat or you don't eat very much meat, a B12 supplement is a really good idea. An iron supplement might be a good idea if you don't eat meat, especially if you are menstruating female, and especially if you are an endurance athlete of any gender or sex. Those tend to be populations that don't get the amount of iron that they need. So an iron supplement might be useful for you. However, there are still food ways to get iron, even if you are a vegan or a vegetarian, whereas getting B12 if you don't eat meat is incredibly difficult. The third thing on this list of things that you absolutely do not need to do to get healthy is run. I will go on record saying I really don't like running all that much. The physical activity guidelines for Americans state that you should be getting 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise or 75 minutes of high intensity exercise every week. However, you can get that moderate intensity or high intensity training in a way that does not include running. That is totally fine. Now, if you enjoy running, go crazy, but it's not a need. On the other side of the coin, you don't have to deadlift. Those physical activity guidelines, they also say, in addition to the cardiovascular exercise that you should be getting every week, you should be doing resistance training twice a week and hitting all the major muscle groups in your body. Deadlifts are an awesome way to get resistance training in. And I love deadlifts as opposed to running. But just like you don't have to run, you don't have to deadlift. There are a lot of different ways that you can get your resistance training in. And that could be with a barbell. It could be with dumbbells, kettlebells. It could be with cable machines, sandbags, weight vests, some types of swimming, maybe body weight exercise to some extent. There are a lot of different ways to get that resistance training in. And resistance training will keep you stronger, it will keep you more balanced, and it will help you age well over time, but you don't necessarily have to deadlift. The fifth thing on this list of things you absolutely do not have to do to stay healthy is eliminate carbohydrates. In fact, I highly discourage you from eliminating carbohydrates from your diet. And that is because there are specific parts of your body that can only use carbohydrates for energy. Most of our body could use fat if it wanted to for energy, and it will, but there are some parts of your body that can only use carbohydrates. Your brain really, really prefers to run on carbohydrates. And so you are not going to do very well if you eliminate carbohydrates from your daily diet. The other thing is that carbohydrates is the only way for our bodies to get fiber. And fiber is hugely important in reducing chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease and specific types of cancer, especially colon cancer. Now, rates of colon cancer in people under 55 have absolutely skyrocketed. And we don't have the exact answer as to why, but I can certainly tell you that not getting enough fiber is not going to help you reduce your risk of developing colon cancer. Number 6, similarly, you also don't have to eliminate fat to remain healthy. Now, just like there are some carbohydrates that are going to be healthier than other carbohydrates, there are some types of fat that are healthier than other types of fat. Unsaturated fat is the type of fat that we tend to get from plants and from fish. Saturated fat is the kind of fat that we typically get from meat and other animal products. We want to be getting most of our fat from unsaturated fat sources. And we want to be getting less of our fat from things like steak, bacon, sausage. That doesn't mean that you can't have any saturated fat, and fats are super necessary in our diet, just like carbohydrates. They give us long-term sustainable energy. Having enough fat in our diet ensures that we can actually absorb some of our fat-soluble vitamins that I talked about earlier. The other thing that fat does for us is it helps us make some of our most important hormones. So things like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, the backbone of those hormones are actually cholesterol. And we will make some cholesterol in the body, but we also get some cholesterol from meat. So we do need to have enough fat in our diet to ensure that we are making our hormones, absorbing our vitamins, and getting enough energy in the day. Number 7 on this list, you absolutely do not have to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of your body weight. In fact, the recommendation to avoid deficiency is actually 0.36 grams of protein per pound of your body weight. Now, for most people, I actually do recommend a higher amount than that, especially if you are active, if you are trying to build muscle, if you are trying to lose weight. Then what we recommend is between 0.7 and 1 gram per pound of your body weight. But there are a lot of people on the internet that will tell you you absolutely have to eat 1 gram per pound of your body weight, and that's just not true. Number 8 on this list, you do not have to go vegan or vegetarian. I've said multiple times already in this video, there is a place in the healthy diet for meat and animal products. That being said, eating diets that are higher in fruits and vegetables and whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds is healthy, but we do get a lot of vitamins and minerals and a lot of protein in an effective and efficient way from meat. So you can absolutely keep meat in your diet and be healthy and age well. Number 9 on the list, you do not need to get IV drips. Again, just like some of the supplements and the greens powders that we talked about, they are providing really high doses of vitamins and minerals that you are just going to pee out. Especially the IV drips of things that are like B vitamins, B as in boy, those are all water soluble, and they are in a ton of different foods, especially carbohydrates. So if you are eating carbohydrates, you are almost certainly getting enough B vitamins that you do not need an IV drip. The next thing is putting collagen in your coffee. Now, full disclosure, my partner does this. He puts collagen in his coffee every single day. There's not necessarily any harm in doing that. However, there are a lot less expensive ways to get enough protein in your day. And if you are eating enough protein and getting vitamin C, so you're eating things like fruits and vegetables, you're going to be taking in enough of the nutrients that you need to make your own collagen. I would even probably recommend something like a protein shake or a like Chobani drinkable yogurt, something like that above collagen, because it's going to cost a little bit less and give you more than just the protein. It's not going to be harmful. It's just not going to be something I'm going to necessarily recommend. It's definitely not going to be something that I say you have to do to stay healthy. Number 11, you do not need to monitor your glucose levels if you are not a diabetic. There is absolutely no established science that says what is an appropriate or a healthy range of fluctuation in your blood glucose levels if you are a healthy person. There is, however, a lot of science that says there is a lot of variation in glucose changes we see in healthy people. Everyone is going to react differently to different foods. And as long as when we go in and we test things like your fasting glucose levels or your HbA1c, if those are normal, then you do not need to be watching your glucose levels all the time. We don't actually know what that data tells us about your risk of developing chronic diseases. Plus, if you live and die by these glucose monitors and you are actually changing what you eat based on how your glucose levels change, you actually might be doing more harm than good. Not to mention, continuous glucose monitors are incredibly expensive and are probably going to overwhelm you with data that you don't understand and have no business interpreting. And you would be better off just following good general nutrition guidelines, eating lots of fruits and vegetables. About half of your plate should be colorful when you make a meal, eating enough carbohydrates, half of which are whole grains, so you're getting enough fiber, 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day, and getting an appropriate amount of protein for your goals. At least 0.36 grams per day, maybe somewhere between 0.7 and 1 gram per pound of your body weight. We have evidence that says following those general guidelines will keep you healthy. Number 12, you absolutely do not need to cold plunge to stay healthy. Now, there is research on cultures and groups that consistently cold plunge that says they may be getting some healthful benefit out of that. However, there are a lot of factors about these cultures and these societies that could be playing into why they are healthier than people who don't cold plunge. For example, Nordic countries that cold plunging is part of their culture, they have a totally different healthcare system and a totally different financial system than we do here in the United States. And so that may be playing a very drastic role in why those Nordic countries tend to have higher health scores than we do here in the United States. Now, I'm not an expert, but I do think that there is some evidence that suggests cold plunging might be useful for certain mental health conditions like anxiety, but it's not a must-do for reducing your risk of developing chronic diseases. Similarly, the next thing on this list is you do not need to sauna to remain healthy. Just like there is evidence that says some cultures that cold plunge are healthier than cultures that don't, there is a good amount of evidence that cultures that regularly have sauna practices tend to be healthier than other places. But again, that is likely due to other conditions in their environment and in their culture. It's not just the sauna keeping folks healthy. Now, that being said, I love to sauna, and I will always recommend doing something that reduces your stress. And maybe a sauna is a way that you can reduce your stress, but there is not necessarily enough evidence to suggest you have to sauna to reduce your risk of developing chronic diseases. Further, those cultures that have, sauna rituals, they are almost always using traditional wood saunas. They are not doing things like red light saunas. Those red light saunas, I think, have even less data to support them being a necessary part of any good health or wellness routine. Number 14 on this list of things that you definitely do not need to do to stay healthy is diet. And when I say diet, I mean cutting calories, restricting, cutting, fasting, any of that, you just don't have to do. Just like these last two, there is some evidence in some cultures that restricting calories and or fasting for some period of time increases longevity. We also have a ton of evidence that says dieting almost always leads to weight gain, sometimes even more weight gain than was lost. And this yo-yoing is actually more dangerous and more harmful to our health than if we would have just stayed at that weight we were at. Going one step further, number 15 on this list is doing something like a hard 75 or even a whole 30. These short-term challenges do not have any evidence to suggest that over a whole lifetime, they are going to reduce your risk of developing chronic diseases. Hard 75 also claims to be a lifestyle change, but it's not. And you know how I know it's not? Because almost no one can actually finish a hard 75. And the people who do finish a hard 75, they don't make it to 150. They definitely don't make it to day 300, and they definitely don't make it to year 5 with those highly regimented, you have to do these 6 things every single day. And that is because it's just too hard and it's impractical in most people's lives. And it's definitely not worth it to go from 0 to 60 on any healthy behaviors. What you want to do is you want to take a step forward. You want to do the next best thing that is going to be a healthful choice that you can implement on a regular basis for the rest of time. It needs to be easy enough that you could actually do it for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years. Now, some of my habits from doing a Whole30, they did stick with me. For instance, I no longer lay on the couch and eat 2 bags of sour candy every night. I have replaced that habit with laying on the couch and eating 2 bags of blueberries every night. Now, that is much healthier for me, but most of the things that I was eating on a daily basis, I don't eat anymore, or I don't eat like I did when I was on a Whole30. And as long as you are not doing a behavior anymore, it is not giving you the benefits. So something like a Hard 75, something like a Whole30, not super useful in reducing your risk of chronic diseases because it's going to inevitably be a short-term change. Number 16 and number 17 on this list. You do not need to eat clean or eat organic to be healthy or reduce your risk of developing a chronic disease. In fact, eating clean, that is a word that has no definition in the health and nutrition or even in your doctor's vocabulary. To me, eating clean means when you bring fruits and vegetables home, you wash it before you eat it. Clean is not a term that means healthy. In fact, most of the people that I hear talking about eating clean actually have some level of an eating disorder. Oftentimes it's orthorexia. Orthorexia is an eating disorder where you are not necessarily restricting how many calories are going in, like anorexia. However, you are highly restrictive on what you are allowed to eat and what you have deemed as healthy. And when we are getting overly restrictive in this way, eating clean, we are oftentimes missing out on a lot of the nutrients that we actually need. And we are doing a lot of damage to our mental health in addition to our physical health. Similarly, eating organic tends to be more of a barrier to health in practice than a contributor. And what I mean is organic fruits and vegetables, organic meats, are much more expensive than conventionally grown. And there is no difference nutritionally between organic and conventionally grown fruits and vegetables. Now, if you want to eat organic because you care about the environmental practices, that is one thing. However, organic foods still use pesticides. And in most cases, they have to use more of those pesticides to be as effective as the pesticides that we use on conventionally grown foods. Most people cannot afford to buy enough fruits and vegetables when they are only buying organic. So I would rather see you buy conventional fruits and vegetables, you wash them before you eat them so they are clean, and you are able to get enough fruits and vegetables to meet the science-backed recommendations for 2 to 4 cups of each fruits and vegetables every single day. Most people in this country are struggling to afford enough groceries overall anyway. Even if you are not struggling to afford enough groceries, almost no one in this country has enough money in emergency savings to pay more than like a $400 expenditure. Most Americans don't have enough money to pay for a major medical happening if something does. So I would skip the organic produce, buy conventional produce, and save that money for something that could actually save your life at some point. All right, number 18. Last thing you absolutely do not have to do to reduce your risk of developing chronic diseases is weigh a certain number or come in at a certain BMI. Weight and BMI is somewhat predictive of our behaviors. And so behaviors are incredibly important to reducing our risk of developing chronic disease. I, in fact, have a whole video about health at every size that I will link here. If you want to know more about that, definitely go watch that video. But being a certain number does not inherently reduce your risk of developing a chronic disease. In fact, the same number on the same person could be a healthy or an unhealthy weight. It totally depends on the life that you are living that leads you to that. If there is anyone, even if it's a doctor or a health professional that says there is a specific number you have to be healthy, they are just wrong. So that was the list of 18 things you definitely don't need to do to stay healthy. I hope you learned a little bit more about each of those things, and maybe I de-influenced you from all of them. Maybe you heard me talk about some of them and you were like, that's a practice I actually do want to keep or I do want to implement. There is some research in some of these things that means it might be good for you. They're just not have to do. So the one thing you absolutely have to do to reduce your risk of developing chronic diseases is quit smoking. If you smoke or if you vape, you are definitively putting yourself at a higher risk of developing almost every single type of chronic disease. At this point, it is undeniable. Smoking and vaping is bad for you. I understand that in some cases, it looks cool as hell, but it is increasing your risk of chronic diseases, and so you need to quit. If you are a young person and if you are thinking about just picking up a cigarette or picking up a vape every now and again in a social situation, don't. There is no benefit to your long-term health. So that is the one thing that you absolutely need to start with if you are working to reduce your risk of developing chronic diseases. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you learned something today. Give me a thumbs up if you did. That will tell the YouTube robots that this was a good video. Show it to more people like you, and I appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.